All right, guys. So for this lecture, we're going to take a little bit of a look at the first part of the urinary system. So we're going to primarily look at both the kidney as well as its major kind of filtration system, which we refer to as the nephron. So urinary system itself is responsible for eliminating quite a bit of the waste products from our body that our digestive system doesn't handle. So it's going to eliminate those nitrogenous wastes, those kind of the leftovers from metabolic processes within the body. It's going to really get rid of any toxins that we have in the body. So those things that are filtered out of our blood, and also drugs are eliminated directly from this portion, which is why it's pretty easy to do a drug screening by doing a urinalysis. Okay. All right. It also helps us regulate a lot of the aspects that we talked about with homeostasis. So things like water balance, electrolyte balance. The pH of our blood is also regulated by our kidneys. Blood pressure, or the amount of water that's in our system, is regulated there as well. Red blood cell production. So our kidneys actually regulate how much or kind of when we start the production of red blood cells. And lastly, they help us activate vitamin D. The organs that are part of the urinary system are those that follow. So we have the kidneys right here that sit on the back wall of the abdomen. The ureters that lead away from the kidneys. These are the little tubes that are leading down towards the bladder. The urinary bladder would be the next portion, and the urethra would be the tube that connects the bladder to the outside. All right. Kidneys themselves are located on the back wall of or what we call the dorsal wall of the abdomen. They are what's referred to as retroperitoneal, meaning they are outside the peritoneal cavity that the rest of those abdominal organs are in. All right. We're going to see a picture here in a second of the cat, and I'll kind of give you a little better idea where that's at. But right here, you can see here's both kidneys, the right and then the left. Here's the vertebral column here, and you can see the kidneys actually sit outside of this peritoneal cavity or abdominal cavity in the back wall here. They're surrounded by a little bit of fat, ribs on both sides. So when we think of the level of the kidneys, they're somewhere between about T12, so almost the last thoracic vertebra, and kind of the third lumbar vertebra. So third lumbar would be about right here in this level. This would be our last thoracic, because that's the last rib kind of attaching to those there. Okay. Right kidneys are usually a little bit lower than left. It's just the way that we're kind of designed. They attach to the ureters and then urinary blood vessels at this little thing called the hilus. All right. So we'll see that here in a second. That's where everything kind of comes in here on each side of the kidney. And then on top of both kidneys, as we learned in the endocrine system, are the adrenal glands. Okay. This is the picture I was talking about before. So this is the cat. Okay, so this is a male cat here that we can see. Here's both kidneys. They've been dissected away from the back wall, so there's usually a little bit of peritoneal cavity, and you can see that over here on both sides. These flaps have actually been cut off the top of those kidneys. This is the diaphragm you can see up here at the top, so that would be the end of the thoracic cavity, now an abdominal cavity. All of the abdominal organs have been removed from this cat. You can see here's the large intestine right here. It's been kind of slung out to the side, and the rest of those intestines are over here as well. But kidneys are right there. Again, here's your ureters, the bladder's right there, urethra, and then since this is a male, here's the penis with the urethra attached to it. Okay. Coverings for the kidneys, like any other organ, we've got a couple different things that kind of go around the outside. So there's what's referred to as the renal capsule. This is what kind of surrounds each kidney. So if I go back to this picture, that capsule's been removed here so we can see them. All right. Then there's also an adipose capsule inside of that is simply there for mostly protection. The kidneys do have a little bit of protection from the ribs. But those lower ribs are what we refer to as floating ribs. So normally at this time we would have covered the skeletal chapter, but since we haven't covered that, you've got two pairs of floating ribs at the very bottom of the rib cage, and those are the ones that sit directly over the kidneys that kind of help protect them. All right. Regions of the kidney. So there are three basic regions. There's what's called the cortex, the medulla, and the pelvis. All right. So the cortex is kind of this outer covering. The medulla then is inside of the cortex. Okay, so this is the medulla right through here. This is where most of kind of the functional part of the kidney is inside of the medulla. And then the pelvis is this little yellow structure that kind of looks like a set of fingers that are reaching out into the kidney itself. So again, you've got cortex around the outside, you've got medulla here, right? And then you've got pelvis right here. There's what's referred to as the hilum. I kind of mentioned that a few slides ago, but the hilum is this little area of the kidney that's kind of pinched in that gives it its shape. And that's where all of the blood vessels and arteries, as well as the ureter, kind of come in and leave this region here. Okay. Kidney structures. So there's a few different pieces here that we need to talk about. So the first one are the medullary pyramids. All right. It's a little tough to see, but these things right here are kind of in a pyramid shape, or almost kind of a triangle shape, if you see it. All right. Some of them are a little easier to see than others, but these are the medullary triangles that we see here. So it's a collection of both a vein, an artery, and then a filtration process here. The renal columns then are kind of these extensions that reach out from the cortex inward. So you can see there's these huge blood vessels that run along each side of the pyramids. All right, so those are the columns. And then the calyces are these little cup-shaped structures at the end of the renal pelvises. So you can see there's these upside down kind of U-shaped structures right here. Those are the calyces. All right, and all of this is designed to kind of pump blood in. All right, so here's the artery coming in. So the artery is going to force blood to the outer portion of the kidney. All right, and then the kidney is going to filter that all through and then put it back into the venous system so it can kind of leave its way out. All right, and then anything that was filtered out is going to funnel its way towards this pelvic region so it can leave via the ureter. Okay, this just shows you a little bit of the blood flow in the kidneys. So just take a little bit of a look at this. So you have the aorta, renal artery, and then the segmented artery. This is really not going to be covered a whole lot. There might be a few questions on this, but you can just kind of see this. This is really kind of what we need to kind of talk about, the afferent and efferent arteriole, because this is the junction where all of that stuff is going to be filtered out. So either the excess water is filtered out through this process here or put back, depending, all right, is in this area over here at the very end, okay? One of the things you do need to know is that there is a renal artery and a renal vein, all right? So make sure you just know the difference between those. The artery obviously is going towards the kidney. The vein is going away from the kidney, okay? All right, next structure we're going to talk about is kind of the functional portion of the kidney, which is referred to as the nephron. So this is the part of the kidney that actually is responsible for helping us form urine. This is what helps us filter all this out there. And there are two main structures within the nephron. So there's what's called the glomerulus. All right, that's this little cup-shaped guy right here at the very end. And then the renal tubule. So all of this kind of collecting in from leading away from that glomerulus is where structures substances are either filtered out or put back in, depending on what the body needs at that time. Okay. So we'll start talking a little bit about the glomerulus first. So all the glomerulus really is a capillary bed. So this is the artery coming into the kidney, and then over the top of this is this little cup-shaped structure called the glomerulus. All right, so this encircles this capillary bed so we can exchange nutrients, we can get rid of water, we can get rid of all those other things that the kidney really needs to filter out for us. Okay, so the arterioles on both sides kind of help maintain pressure. That's the reason why these guys are kind of looped around. We want high pressure so we can force things out at this end of the arteriole, okay? And then there's a large afferent, so the large afferent arteriole coming in, so we have higher pressure coming in, and we have a narrow efferent arteriole coming out, so we have lower pressure coming out, and that's what helps us kind of help this filtering process. The capillaries coming in have these little what are called podocytes, so these little extensions that kind of reach out from them. And then the glomerulus kind of sits on top of or sits within this capsule. All right. So this whole structure right here is the glomerulus capsule, and the glomerulus is just this, capillary bed within it. All right. Leading away from that then is the renal tubule. So the glomerular capsule, or what's referred to sometimes as the Bowman's capsule, is that portion that sits over the capillary bed. And then we have what's called the proximal convoluted tubule. So this is directly away from the glomerulus itself. All right, it's going to go down and make a little bit of a loop here at what we call the loop of Henle. All right, and then the minute it comes off the loop of Henle and starts to go back up, it then becomes what we refer to as the distal convoluted tubule. So the proximal is directly from the Bowman's capsule to the loop, and then the distal is from the loop to the the end of this basic process here. Okay. All right. There are two types. Sorry, I got a little carried away there. So we have two types of nephrons. There are cortical nephrons. These are ones that are directly in the cortex. Most of the nephrons that we have in the kidneys are cortical nephrons. And then there are juxtamedullary nephrons, which are the ones that are kind of towards the boundary of where the cortex and medulla start. So these are a little bit closer down here. So the medulla would be here, cortex here. These guys are kind of on the edge of that process, whereas the cortical nephrons are a little bit further out in there. Okay. And then the last portion here that we need to talk a little bit about are what are called protrubulary capillaries. All right, these guys arise from the afferent arteriole of the glomerulus. They are normally under low pressure unless you've got somebody who has some sort of kidney issues, but they should be. They attach directly to the venule, and then they kind of cling to that renal tubule. And this right here, these capillaries, is where we have a lot of the reabsorption, or what we call reclaiming, of water and other substances like potassium and calcium and so whatnot in that collecting tubule. Okay, so those are our big portions there. Make sure you take a look back over the portions of the kidney, definitely the different sections, the cortex, medulla, and then the pelvis. And then make sure you take a look at the different sections of the nephron as well. All right, we'll talk a little bit more later in the week, next week, about the actual process of urine and how that nephron actually functions there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and stop there.